Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me is my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlett. What's up, Joe?
Nothing much, Dave. How you doing?
Doing good, Joe.
Okay. Well, you like you had to think about it.
We'd like to welcome all of our viewers and listeners back to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. If this is your first time, we hope that you get something positive out of it. If you're a returning listener or viewer, thank you for the support. And with that, in our usual fashion, one of us will identify the topic for discussion for today, which is me, and I will toss it over to Joe, and we'll start our discussion. So today's topic is one moment, let me remind myself. What are your plans for 2026? That was a little bit of a delayed response. So, Joe, what are your plans for 2026?
In the theme of what we've done the last few weeks, so go back a few weeks, and first thing we talked about was finding your focus. Then we talked a little bit about shifting gears, and then in last week's episode, I won't skip over, but episode 200 was celebrating episode 200. So again, that's still uh, warm and fuzzy in our hearts of reaching that milestone. But then after that, we went right back to business and talked about, is your next goal in sight? So along that line, since we've identified what our next goals are, of course, the next course of action would be to develop a plan for 2026. And so the timing is just about right because we are fast approaching the end of season 4. And in season 5, or the beginning of season 5, there are some changes that we've kind of touched on. And I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but we are going to be making some changes uh, to our podcast. It's still going to be providing content to help you along your journey, but we're going to just refocus a little bit or realign. And so when you ask, what are your plans for 2026? To be honest, we both have quite a few plans for 2026. We're not thinking in terms of our New Year's resolution. We start doing something and then we stop. No, this is some long-term plans that we've got in place or we're working on currently to help throughout the entire year of 2026 and beyond. So we've identified our next goal in sight, and so we do have plans. So our question posed to you is, do you have your plan? Do you have a plan for your 2026? What does that look like for you? How did you accomplish that? Or have you got your next goal in sight? Or are you still kind of hovering around that? So that's what we're going to talk about today is just making sure you get that plan. It doesn't make sense to have this idea or goal in sight and then just wish it to be complete or to appear. So it does take some action on your part. So I'll stop there and let Dave interject.
Yeah, so when we think about, what are your plans for 2026? Like Joe said, is your next goal in sight? Planning. What is the plan behind that goal or goals that you have? Have you started drafting an outline on what you need to do to achieve each one of those goals and
Right.
establish a time frame within for those goals, not just here's my plan, here's my outline, here's the three things I'm going to do. We've talked about this in the past, establishing a timeline for each one of those goals and sub goals in that outline to establish that commitment, to keep that focus going so you can keep track of your progress and make sure you are taking strides and making strides and taking action towards that plan and accomplishing those goals. And
Hey, Dave, real quick. So if anybody out there is thinking, I can't, I'm not a project manager, guess what? If you're doing these types of things, setting timelines, creating your action plan and all those, that's project management. And I think we have an episode where we kind of talk about project management. I just want to throw that out there. People think, well, I can't do this. I can't manage a project. You absolutely can. So I
yeah, and
just,
I believe we talked about that in this
right.
past year. So,
Yep.
and to Joe's point, if you're having a household, if you have a house or you're renting or you're working or you're volunteering or you're taking care of the home, there are things that need to be done. And if
Mhm.
you're accomplishing those things, that is what project management is.
Yep.
Waking up on time, you know, getting ready for work, going to work, doing what you need to do at work. That's all project management. We do
Yep.
it all the time. It's just that there's not a at-home version certification. Trademark idea right there. Jot that down.
Right.
So we are all doing project management, just not on the formalized way and to the scale in a
Right.
corporate environment or government environment. So, when we talk about making those plans, think of it like a shopping list. You're going to go to the store. You're going to get certain things for,
Right.
certain items for your breakfast this week, or your lunch this week, or your dinners this week, or maybe that's your food plan for this week. So that's one. And then what about your cleaning supplies? And what about, do you need some ancillary clothing because the weather's changed in certain parts of the country?
Right.
That's what project management is. It's coming up with those plans, those lists, and identifying what you need to get. Maybe you don't need to get milk today, so we'll do that next week's grocery
Right.
shopping instead of this week's. So that's that, setting those time frames that we're talking about.
Well, and I want to touch on again our plans. When we do create our plans, we don't want to make them non-attainable. We don't want to put them so far down the road. So we don't want to, have a plan for 2026 that says finish my degree in 2026. We can put that, but we also have to put some sub goals in there too so that we can achieve. So it may be you have 20 classes to complete by December 2026. Maybe in your first, under your first subcategory or sub goal, you might put complete two classes within the next couple of months. And then you might even under that, you might put complete the first class, complete week. I mean, so you want to just make it those milestones, not so easy that you don't even notice them. But like Dave said, start to create that discipline, that consistency, and that's how you do it. It's by checking off, even like you just said with a shopping list. You may have dinner, lunch, and breakfast there, but you may only do just breakfast. You may only do just lunch because if you try and do that entire list, it's going to be overwhelming. So maybe you just select a couple of days and say, "Well, I'll need breakfast, lunch, and dinner for these days. Why don't you just do that?" Versus trying, you'll be in the store for hours potentially, and walk away with this huge bill. So if you think in terms of when you're creating that plan or developing that plan for 2026, really think about those milestones along the way, and that you don't have to wait that entire year to celebrate, hey, I won or I finished this or completed this goal. But make it to where it's fun and you have an opportunity to celebrate. Maybe after the 1 month mark, you go out to dinner with the family, or you treat yourself to something. So those types of things that'll help with the momentum, the consistency, and the celebration of, okay, I am achieving, I am getting to that next level.
Yeah, and clarify, project management mindset was the topic
Okay.
around
Yeah.
mid to late September of 2025. So if you need a reference point, that's a good one to use so far as this project management mindset and how to plan for your goals for 2026. I like what you said about keeping the goals simple and obtainable, and that gets back to um, you know making your goals for the year. I think that's a little redundant, but using those techniques like specific, measurable, achievable, and time bound, or
Right.
relevant and time bound, SMART goals.
Right.
Make don't to Joe's point, don't make the goals so hard that you're destined for failure.
Right.
Or but do make them a little challenging because things are going to come up, and it'll just reinforce um, that self gratefulness, I guess, that you'll achieve when you achieve these goals. We talked about attending graduating college for the different degrees and walking across the stage. commencement, how important that is,
Yeah.
because it does solidify that accomplishment. And to Joe's point, celebrate, do something for yourself, do something with
Right.
the family, treat yourself. It doesn't have to be, a new car every time,
Right.
but maybe once you reach that, that big major goal,
Yeah.
you do
Major
something a little bit
milestone.
big for yourself and plan for it. Don't expect to win the lottery on Wednesday and think, oh yeah, now I can get that car every week. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that that critical self-reflection on what you've achieved because you've stuck to that plan, because you've been dedicated, because you've committed, and because you've been diligent and assertive and actively conscious about obtaining and achieving those goals. So
Right.
having that roadmap, and we've talked about the roadmaps before, create that roadmap for that journey, for that goal, or for the goals that you have this year. And again, make sure that they're time bound. Set that time so you can say, wow, I'm ahead of schedule. This is great. Joe and I
Right.
love to do, podcasts with guest speakers. It allows us to get a few podcasts in the bank. But then there's other times where we go week to week, and that's sometimes, and that's okay. There's nothing
Right.
wrong with that. So just be aware of what those plans are. And if you and should you get behind a little bit, what is your backup plan? What's your plan of action in case you get a little bit behind? What adjustments are you going to make for that plan for those contingencies that may occur?
I think that's a very important point that you just brought up about the whole idea of, you may not be able to stick to that plan the way you want it. So having a backup plan or being able to, be flexible enough to, shift courses if needed. So that is also a very important piece of that because again, if we hold ourselves to this strict, rigid plan, that could be disheartening if we don't reach a milestone or goal. Now we're like, oh wow, I failed. So remember, you have to build that flexibility in because we like to think that everything is going to go as planned, but that's not always the case. So just being able to build that contingency plan as well as that major plan that you have in place. But that's also a very important piece of that, just so that you allow yourself that flexibility to move in and out if necessary, if the need comes or arises. You just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So just having that flexibility to do that, I think, is very important.
Yeah, and when we talk about again being timely with your goals, you don't have to look at it for the entire year. And we encourage you
Right.
not to look at it
Yeah.
for the entire year. Plan it out for maybe it's the next 3 weeks till the end of the month, and then maybe the next month, and then maybe the next month. Maybe just do it a quarter for the next 3 months.
Right.
What are your short-term goals to help you achieve those longer-term goals? Break it down. Be
Yeah.
specific. Make sure make sure that they're achievable and realistic, like we've mentioned. The worst thing you can do for yourself is to set unrealistic expectations for yourself. You
Right.
know, I'm going to lose, for me, I'm going to lose 75 pounds in the next 2 weeks. That's a great idea.
Right.
And there's many ways to do it. Probably not FDA recommended though. So, make the plans feasible and realistic and achievable, knowing that you can reach them. And so by the end of the month, I'm going to use my weight example. Maybe I have lost a pound a week. So now I've lost 4 pounds. And then, maybe the next month it's going to be a pound and a half or 2 pounds. Think about the adage of, you know, moving the mountain one shovel at a time instead of
Right.
taking on the whole mountain.
Well, and again, I think you bring up another good point as far as making it sustainable. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you could possibly lose a pound a week, which is probably doable and sustainable over a long period of time. But to think that you're going to lose, 10, 15, or 20 pounds a week, and so by 6 months from now, you've lost all that weight, that's probably not realistic. And again, it comes that discouraging part of I felt. So I like the just a quick example that you shared was 1 pound a week. That is doable. That's things you can control, more exercise, less sitting on the couch or binge watching TV and things like that. Maybe a walk in the morning or in the evening after work. that can help sustain that goal. And again, to help you reach that goal of possibly 4 pounds a month. And
Mhm.
if you reach more than that, then it's definitely a win. But if you can set it up to where you things you can stretch yourself, but you can attain, then that's a win.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying about the sustainability piece, Joe, because that's something that's overlooked, I believe. You know, you have the best intentions, the best plans, the perfect time frames, and the backup scenarios for when you need to take the car and get the oil changed, or there's a blizzard or snowstorm or something. But that sustainability piece, what is
Right,
going to keep you going when those contingencies happen, or what's going to keep you going when you get those successes? Maybe you're ahead of schedule and you're like,
right,
yeah, I'm doing great, my momentum, I don't have to do anything now, I can just coast.
right,
Well, yeah, you can coast for so long, but once you hit the bottom of that hill, you're going to need to have some way to get some
yep,
momentum. So how do you keep that sustainability and that momentum going when you are doing well? What
right,
things are you doing to keep yourself going? That's not the time to start taking 4 days off a week if
right,
you're going
yep,
good. Maybe back off. We've talked about this before. Back off the accelerator a little bit. So maybe you're not doing 100 miles an hour. Maybe you're doing 80 miles an hour, but you're still cruising at that
right,
point, and you're keeping that momentum going, and that you're in that excitement mode. You're in that adrenaline rush. That dopamine's going through your system, and you're just like, I've got this. I got this. I got this. Just stay focused at that point. We've talked about this. Don't get distracted
right.
with the minutia. Just stay focused and keep going with your going forward with your plans.
Well, and that reminds me back when the kids were in school, and so we had a scheduled time every day for them to no matter what was happening outside, if they were playing with their friends or whatever they were doing, we had specific time set aside for them to come in and do homework for at least half an hour. And we always got to, but I don't have homework today. Well, go in and do something productive. Read, do
Mm-hmm.
something that is going to continue to contribute to learning.
Yeah.
And so that goes back to that consistency piece. Yeah, you might have got all your homework done, even in school, or but you still have to keep that mindset up. Well, I need to still do something. And I also found that too, when I was going through my education journey, if I you know got all my assignments done ahead of time, I still chose to do something that was still going to continue to further my development. And I think if you keep that in mind, you don't turn into that lull, or you don't take the long period of time off and then come back and then have to struggle to get back up that hill, like you said. And that's why that was one of the reasons why I pushed through my education
Mm-hmm.
like I did, because I knew I was on a high. I had that momentum, I had that consistency, I had that discipline. And that's why I just continued to push through, because I knew it would be more difficult for me to stop after each milestone and take a break, because then I'd struggle to come back. So again, that for me, that approach worked, for to stay consistent, to stay in the mindset of not done yet, and that definitely helped me.
Mhm. Yeah, it reminds me of when I was in high school, and I know a lot of schools have gotten away from this, but the semester would not end until after the holiday at the end of the year, and then you take your midterm exams in January, and it's like
Oh
I've already
wow,
forgotten
okay.
90% of the
Right,
stuff because I was too busy opening presents and
right,
drinking eggnog and watching you know the Christmas shows and stuff. So I know a lot of schools have gotten away from that to where your midterm exam is before the holiday or the end of the calendar year. But I thought that was interesting because it reminded me when you're talking about going to school, having those breaks over the holidays and you're still in the middle of that class,
yeah,
or and it's like, holy cow, what do we do? Or the summer break, and it's
right,
like,
yeah,
do I want to take classes or do I not want to take
yeah,
classes? And it's like, what kind of momentum are you losing? I mean, if you're in traditional schooling and you have the summer off, maybe take one or two summer classes just to keep yourself
right,
engaged. You still have plenty of time for fun and vacation. And conversely, if you're on a different non-traditional program where it's in blocks, or 6 or 8 week or 12-week curriculum, then plan for the holidays. What are you going
Right.
to do to keep the momentum? Are you going to continue doing research? Are you going to be doing a little bit of writing? Or are you just going to take that break because you've gotten to the point where it is sustainable to take that time off, catch your breath, and then jump back in? And another one
Right.
of our episodes from last calendar year was intentional planning. And that's what we're talking about. When you talk about what is your plan for 2026, we want you to be intentional about your plans, your goals, how you've structured them, how you've timed them. You need to, get one goal done before you can go to the next step to be the next goal. Or can you work on two simultaneously?
Right.
Or, what are the other possibilities that you need to plan for and structure?
Well, when again, and you bring up another good point. We think of our plan as this is all I can do, but the reality is that we can be doing simultaneously things simultaneously. And I again, I found that for me to be helpful to outline what I'm going to be doing for this, like when I was going to school for this, then for my military career. I had a couple of things that I was working on at the exact same time. And of course, I had the family. So all those things were running, all together.
Mhm.
But I had a plan for each one of those, and I think that's important too, that you kind of keep them separated so that you can maintain and keep control of it. Because if I said, okay, I want to do all of these things within this time frame, now you got things crossing over, not sure what has priority, all those types of things. So it may be, a very important note to if you have two or three things that you want to do that year or, in that time frame, make a plan for each one of those so that you could check off the boxes on each one of those and not waiting till, okay, I've got this group thing I've got to complete, all these things combined, and you never completed because you got all these things intertwined into one. But if you can set them aside and do them simultaneously, you can still be winning. Maybe two of the three you're winning, the third one you're still having problems with. You're still winning. So if you think of it in that term, you've got projects, and I've got a extremely major project, or I've got something, hey, I'd like to do. So that's how you can categorize those things so that you still win. Again, it's about those wins, feeling good about what you're doing and wanting to continue to do it because you are seeing those wins.
Yeah, and I like what you said about prioritizing because that's important. And we've
Yeah.
talked about before that if everything's on fire and everything's a
Yep.
priority, then nothing's a priority.
Right.
So you have to break it down. You have to prioritize and think about what's most important. And to your point that you also made, working simultaneously, you're already doing that.
Right.
If you're alive and listening to this podcast, that's your personal life, and you might have a school life, and you might have a work life.
Right.
You might be in a relationship. So you're doing this project management already. You just
Right.
don't realize it. There's different facets to it. And maybe you have a hobby on top of that. And
Yep.
maybe, you do take walks and you keep fit. So these are all different projects that you're working on for yourself and for your family or just yourself. And you're already doing it. And Joe and I talked about that so many times before, from like even interviewing techniques. You're
Right.
already doing that stuff.
Yep.
You're
Right.
already doing it. You're having conversations. That's what a lot of your planning should be, are conversations, dialogue, and prioritization. So you understand what you're committing to, and talk about it with your friends, your family, your peers, your significant other, your kids. Maybe they have some priorities of their own and you're not aware of it. Maybe they're joining, football or basketball or cheer or something like that. And you're like, whoa, I wasn't aware of that because I'm working 12-hour shifts. How am I going to make that happen? So, make sure you're communicating with the right people. We've talked about that before, having
Right.
the right people present during those discussions, during those air quotes interviews, that you're talking and having dialogue. That's qualitative inquiry. Is just That's what conversation is. It's a conversation. That's an interview, is a conversation.
Right. Yeah. That again, I don't know how you're making all these good points. This is not normal. So,
Oh, stop it. you you know I'm not that smart.
I
I've got
know
I've
that's exactly what I'm saying. But no, you again, just another good point that, even though you may have all these plans in place, if they involve someone else, make sure they're aware of it. There's a joke that I have seen a couple of times, maybe in a meme or something like that, where the husband, the wife is planning all these trips or vacations and things like that, and then you're left with, uh, you're like, where are we going? Because
Yeah.
you haven't been in the planning phase. You're just like, okay, I'll pack my bags. Okay, where's our destination? I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind of that's acceptable,
Do
I
I
guess.
pack winter clothes or summer clothes or
Right,
someplace in
exactly.
between?
So, again, I jokingly say that, but sometimes that's what you end up doing. You end up making all these plans that involve other people, and then you come to that time or that point where they have to be involved, and they're like, "What are you talking about? We never, we never had a conversation about this. And now we're doing this." So again, you get that if you're married, because sometimes that's the way it happens. I told you that. Oh yeah, okay. So, but that is very important, that if it involves other people or other situations that are going to overlap or spill into someone else's area of responsibility or their lives, they probably need to be aware of that, so that you're not just making these plans and then they all fall apart because, again, you didn't get that coordination right, or you infringed on somebody else's area or something like that. So that's like I said, Dave was just wowing me today with all these good points. So
Oh gosh, I'm blushing now. Oh man, too funny. So, I'm going to go back through a few of the episodes that we had last year that kind of pertain to what are your plans. And I mentioned project management mindset around mid to end of September. Um, Interviewing strategies, that was July-ish sometime. And making progress, that was in the August timeframe. These are all things that you can use. These are episodes that you can listen to get some more insight on, you know, accomplishing your plans,
right,
establishing your plans, sticking to those plans. Um, and then another one is like when we really started this was in mid to end September, the me time. What
mm,
time are you
yeah,
taking out to recharge your batteries? And plotting and scheming for success. I love the title of that one.
right,
Really think about these plans that you're making and making
yeah,
sure you're taking the right steps. And then let's see, where are you today according to those plans and the bigger picture? That's November and November. We talked a lot about that stuff in November. So think about these things that you're doing and how to accomplish them. We've got the tools out there. Look at the titles of our previous episodes and see what's out there. We've got a lot, like Joe said, over 200 episodes now of
right,
good content that overlaps and intertwines with each other for a reason, because we do want to build on these topics. And even when we have guest speakers, they may not build upon each other, but they're building on different insights that Joe and I
right,
don't have. And that's
yep,
one of our plans for this year is to hopefully get some more guest speakers on.
yep,
I know the holidays kind of ran us aground, but it doesn't stop Joe and I from going forward.
right.
So we've got a couple of minutes left, Joe. What are your final thoughts that you'd like to leave with our viewers and listeners?
I'll just go back to where I started, kind of with not all the reciting all the other episodes, but again, going back to, if your goal is in sight, then have you created a plan for that goal? Again, because you could have this idea that's just, blooming and a great thing to do or accomplish, but if you haven't put a plan to it or assigned some type of sequence of events, then it's just a dream. It's not a plan. And the other thing about a plan is, if and I recommend the writing down of your plan so that you can see it, whether it's on a computer screen or it's on a refrigerator magnet. Writing down that plan, so not only you see it, but other people see it. And then again, back to Dave's point about sharing that plan with other people and making sure that it's coordinated properly, so that you don't end up, in Hawaii and got a fur coat,
Yeah.
in the wrong season. So, just again, if you got your plan in place, make sure it's visible, make sure it's attainable. Like Dave said, the SMART goals. So just keeping in mind that it is subject to change when you put it together, so that it's not too rigid, so that you get discouraged and not wanting to complete it. So,
I, I'm not even going to add to that because that was put so well, Joe. So, um, with that, we would like to thank all of our viewers and listeners for joining us on another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, career development podcast. Um, our goal is to provide some nuggets to help you move forward on your journey, just like Joe and I are always continuously moving forward on our journeys. So, with that, we would like to we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.